Hello and welcome to Raheen's page. Today we have Erika Batdorf. And hello, Erika, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am great. So, can you please introduce yourself for the people out there who don't know you?
Yes. I'm Erika Batdorf. I live in Toronto, Canada. I'm an actor and I create my own work, and I also have a technique for training actors.
Yes. And so, I really think that anybody's childhood really has a reflection on what they grow up to be. So, how was your childhood?
I grew up in a very rural, small town in Nova Scotia, which is a very small, sort of fishing and farming part of Nova Scotia. It's a very beautiful part of the world. And my mother was a performance artist and a painter. And as a teenager, we didn't have much money, so I wanted to travel. So I started traveling dressed as a clown and hiking as a clown. I sort of became interested in theater and performance.
Yes, so we could actually say that this performing in this theater and this, basically performing arts thing that it came from your mom.
In some ways, yes. My mother had huge influence on me. She was a very unusual artist living in the country, and she did abstract painting and she did bizarre performance art. And I grew up surrounded by her and influenced by her for sure.
Yes, so you grew up in that environment that, that you kind of knew that, you might actually end up being a performer. So how were your teen years and when did you really realize that, my place is the stage?
Well, I left high school. I was rather smart at math and physics, and I thought that I was going to do math. And I got a very big math scholarship because I had a good math brain. But then I fell in love with theater and ended up starting in university in theater. But I wasn't very interested in traditional acting. I knew that I wanted to write my own shows and create my own material. So I left and started studying quite young, at about 17 and 18, with the theater company. I apprenticed with the theater company in the United States. I left Canada and went to the United States and apprenticed with an all-female theater company that was doing a lot of different styles of physical theater.
Yes, and how did you think of theater at first? Because the first time you step on the stage and you see the script, your director, it's very different for first when you first do that.
Yes, I'm a very nervous performer. So the first few shows that I had were very stressful for me because I I'm not one of those people that's super excited to get on stage. I like creating theater and I like directing and I like writing theater, but performance, which I've done a ton of my whole life, I'm one of those performers that gets very nervous. So it was hard at first, but I so loved rehearsing and I loved translating language into things that were on the stage that I kept doing it.
Yes. And so, do you remember one of your first plays or the first roles that you did?
I was in Jacques Brel's. I can't remember the name of the play. I think Jacques Brel is alive and well and living in Paris. I love Jacques Brel, and at that time, of course, I was a kid. I didn't know who he was. He's a brilliant French singer and amazing sort of storyteller singer. And I was in that. That was the first play that I was in, and then I was in a small play that toured through small towns in Nova Scotia when I was about 18.
Yes. And so, do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother who lives now in Hawaii, who is a Hindu Swami. I have a sister who lives in New Hampshire, who is a nurse. And I have another sister who unfortunately passed away.
Yes. So, in your house, you really have a lot of different, you could say, a lot of different professions and a lot of different people that do different things.
Yes.
So you really, did what your mom was kind of doing. So when did you become a director? Because, first you're an actor and then you become a director.
I think I was a director because people started to ask me, because I created my own work, and people started to ask me if if I would help them create theater. So I do a lot of devised theater where I'll get a community of people together and we'll have a theme or a concept. Often if it's me originating it, I come with a lot of choreography and a lot of ideas because I worked as a choreographer for a long time. So I come with a lot of material and I help the community work together to collaborate to create a show. And so people, because they would see me perform, they would ask me to do it. So I just began to be invited to do that more and more. And then sometimes I work with a written play, and sometimes I work with an idea or a story or a book or an image. And I really like to collaborate with a variety of different people, like artists and musicians and dancers and actors, to create things that are unusual and come together as a live performance.
Yes, and I really believe that theater is a really old form of entertainment, and it's really really important for us because theater gives us a look into somebody else's life, which actually looks like somebody else's life, and we see how it goes there and how it's ours, and then we also get some sort of message. So, what were some very important messages that you conveyed through your acting?
That's a really good question. In many years ago, I'm really inspired by a poet named Tahirih, who's from Iran, and she was one of the early feminists, and she unveiled publicly in 1840. And I was very inspired by her poetry, her writing, her courage. And I created a play, a solo play called Poetic License that's toured all over the place. And I was performing it in Indonesia. And I only in this play mentioned Tahirih once or twice, but a bunch of the women there came and asked me about her because in Indonesia, of course, many women wear various forms of the veil, and they were asking me, really curious about her, and then I went back to Canada and created a huge production inspired by her poetry and working with an Iranian woman who had to leave. Tahirih was very outspoken about women's rights, which wasn't very popular at that time in Iran. So a lot of the people that were performing her music had to leave. So I worked with an Iranian musician. I worked with a First Nations Canadian singer and actor, and a lot of African diaspora actors. And I put we collaboratively created this very exciting production inspired by her poetry. And I would say that was one of the highlights of my work over the years. That I tend to do content that is very sort of important and intense and relevant. Hopefully, that's my goal.
Yeah, and so if you if I ask you that, what's one thing that you love about theater or you love about acting, what would that one thing be?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that so many art forms come together. And I like the fact that people have to work together. Toronto is an exciting city because there's so much diversity here, and there's an opportunity for us to really work on bringing different kinds of people together. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's full of challenges, but I would say that it's very exciting. So not just bringing actors and dancers and musicians and together, but also bringing people who have very different training, very different backgrounds together. How does an Iranian singer sing with a Canadian or Aboriginal Canadian artist? Like, how do they don't even sing in the same musical structure? So those things are very exciting to me. So the fact that it builds community, but in a way that's not just talking. It includes the body, and it includes language, and it includes visual information, and I think that helps us to move beyond just words.
Yes, and so why basically I started acting was that acting really gives you like a voice that you could convey very beautiful messages that just through a written play, directed and rehearsed again and again. It looks so real. It looks as though you are that character. And so when you were in the theater, so you get to act with a lot of new people, a lot of new actors who, young people. And how was that experience for you?
I love it. Each new project, you often meet new people and you become intimate. You become close to people in a rehearsal process. I'm sure you've experienced that, where you're in this such intense period of time, and it requires all of you. You have to be present in so many ways. So I find it very exciting to each project that I do. I feel like I'm going to fall in love with a whole new community. Like I'm going to have a new family if it's going well. And as we know, it doesn't always go easily or well. But each time I bring a group of people together, or that I'm involved with a group of people that someone else is leading, I feel like I get to fall in love with a bunch of people.
Yeah. And so do you have any funny stories to share from theater? Because that I know that backstage there's a lot and a lot of things happening from what you see what's going on stage. There's makeup, costumes. There's a lot of things. So do you have any funny stories?
Oh my goodness. Funny story. When I was in high school, one of the first plays that I did, and I didn't even think I wanted, at that time I thought I was going to go into physics. And my sister's, she was doing a play, and the man that was playing her husband, at the last minute, he got scared and he canceled. And I had been running lines with my sister. So I stepped in to play her husband, and I wore a shirt. He was supposed to take his shirt off at one point in the play, and I wore a t-shirt that had black marks on it to look like a hairy chest, which was ridiculous. And I ran onto the stage, and there was this fake wall, very tall fake wall. And as I ran onto the stage, and thank goodness I was standing in the doorway, the entire wall fell over, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs with the kind of spear, Tavarish, Tavarish. And the wall fell around me, and it was very much like a Buster Keaton moment. It was ridiculous, and it was. I think it's one of the things that probably made me stay in theater.
Yes, because it's something that you don't expect to happen. I mean, you've just been running lines and you don't know the next moment you get to be your sister's husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I know that you were the creator of the Batdorf technique. That's basically for performing, but it could actually be very well used for theatrical purposes. So when did you really realize that you should actually study about how the movement happens, the emotions and the interoception and all these things that are related?
Well, I had been studying physical theater for a very long time. And, because I was doing a very working in kinds of theater that weren't mainstream, I needed a job at a certain point. And I started realizing that I could train actors, more traditional actors, very well in how to use their body for the stage and for film. And so at a fairly young age, I started teaching in university. And in that context, I realized that a lot of this very stylized theater that I was doing didn't work well for authentic and believable acting. And at the same time, I was really trying to understand, I have a trauma history, and I was really trying to understand how trauma can be healed through theater and performance. So many years later, it wasn't a short journey. I really, having studied a lot of brain science on trauma, a lot of my own investigation and my own healing work, working with groups of students, I developed this technique to help people really feel deeply the specific sensations of their body. And those specific sensations, which are connected, like your breathing, your blood flow, your digestion, your relationship to gravity, are very connected to the emotional brain. And working back and forth with emotional permission, helping actors find a space where they're comfortable releasing their emotions, and working with deep scanning of deep physical sensation led me to this technique.
Yes, and for how long have you been developing this technique and then you worked on it, you studied and everything? So for how long did you do working on this?
Well, I was performing in New York not too long ago, and thanks to Facebook, some of my students who are performing on Broadway from 1989 found me, and they happened to be having a class reunion. It was so fun. So I got to go to this class reunion of a bunch of Broadway actors in New York when I was doing my own show there. And so I would say really that was my first class where I was trying to teach this stuff. And I wasn't as good at it then as I am now, but I really so probably about 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very beautiful thing when you get to be somebody else. Like it's really cool sometimes.
Yes, I love that. I don't know if you've seen my website. I play men, I play animals, I play old people and young people. I play a 4-year-old, I play a 75-year-old. That's the beauty of being able to do good physical trained acting and good vocally trained acting is you really can transform yourself, and I enjoy that a great deal.
Yes, because I played a boy once, and so it's a very funny story that I was playing a boy. It was not really a theater play, but it was puppets, and we had this audio going on in the background. So I just said it once as a boy, and no more talking. And I was just playing the boy, and the light went off, and the audio just it was finished. And I realized that there's no electricity. That means I need to say the dialogue. And I kept saying it as a girl because in Urdu, there's a difference between the tenses and everything for a girl and for a boy. And man, was it hilarious. The children watching, they were so like, okay, is that a boy or is that a girl? First it was a boy, now it's a girl. So the kids were confused, but because they were kids, they kind of understood it, and they moved on. But it was very, very funny. So you really shared that you were the kind of actor who was nervous before going on stage. So how did you later on started overcoming that nervousness?
No, I think that helped me the most. I was very successful at 25, had a kind of very big year. And that's when I really had to stop performing for a while to figure it out. Because I thought if I keep performing, I'm going to become very ill unless I deal with it. And I realized that when I focus on my audience, if I make what I'm doing, it's not about whether I'm good or not. It's about, am I communicating something? Who am I communicating it to? How do I become more interested in the audience, especially as a solo performer or my scene partner if I'm on stage with somebody else? How do I fall in love with my audience? How do I fall in love with my scene partner in a way that makes it, I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about serving the audience and giving them some information. And if I focus on those things, then it's less about, am I good? Am I bad? Because that's in a sense not relevant, because I've been to plays where the acting wasn't so good, but I was deeply touched by the material. So I try to focus on what can I give you as an audience?
Yeah. And so what do you think? Because in a theater play, everything plays a part. The actors are important, the writing, the directing, the content. So what do you think really, really has the largest influence on the quality of the theater play?
Well, sometimes it comes down to excellence in, do you have enough training? Have you worked hard enough? Is there a lot of unity amongst the people involved? That makes a huge difference. Are people working well together and communicating well together? Are you honest? Is there a foundation of truthfulness so that people are telling the truth? Because sometimes if you're working with another actor and something's not going well and you don't say anything, then there becomes a foundation that's not real, and then you can't build from there. So you have to have truthfulness. You have to have everybody has to be committed to excellence, and there has to be enough time to be able to do good work.
Yes, and so how important do you think is improvisation in theater acting? Because a moment where you forget your lines and you're like, uh-oh, and then improvisation works. That's the only thing on earth that could work at that time.
Yes, I do a lot of devices here, and you are using the tool of improvisation to create the material that you're doing. So improvisation is a very important tool to build work, to experiment, and also to be able to be comfortable on stage when things don't go well. So it's a critical tool. And of course, there are many forms of theater that are based on improvisation. That's really hard. I've only done a little bit of performing with actual structured improv. That's hard, and I really respect the actors who work with live improvisation. That's very difficult.
Oh, that is, I mean, and there's such like bizarre improvisation games and stuff. You really just take out of your pocket the piece of paper and you read out the line, and that's very, very hard to do. And so, have you ever worked on camera, like on a film or a TV show?
I haven't documented the work, And I train a lot of actors that work on film. And I work with my technique. I've trained some teachers of my technique, and some of them do film work, and they say that the work is very good for film. But I myself, I would love to, but it's not. I find it's a very different industry, and I'm so focused on creating sort of metaphorical and abstract and theater that is more less naturalistic, that I haven't had the opportunity. I'd love to someday, but not at this stage in my life. No.
Yes. And so if you had to explain theater to a person who does not know about theater, or, even if you say theater, they would think of Romeo and Juliet. So what would you like to say to those people who don't know about the magic of theater and how theater basically works?
Well, I think that for most people understand television nowadays, or streaming Netflix or whatever. I would say that being in a room where it's happening live is more exciting, because you know that something could go wrong, like that the possibility for things to change, for surprise. When you watch Netflix, no one's going to make a mistake. So there's something less exciting about it. I also think everybody remembers when they were a child, hopefully playing. Theater is like play, and it's full of experimentation and risk, very much riskier than TV, because TV you can fake, all that stuff is fake, right? No one's really dying. It's all, fake. So with theater, it's real, even, so if they're sword fighting, even if it may be carefully choreographed, they're still really sword fighting right in front of you. Or if there's someone having an emotional moment, if they're crying, if they're laughing, they may be trained to have that emotion, but it's happening right in front of you. So I think it's very, very exciting, and it affects the observer very differently than a flat screen TV.
Yes, and now our interview is coming to an end, but at the end, what message would you want to give to all the young actors out there?
Oh, I would say study. Sometimes we look at TV and we think that it's just a matter of looking good, and I would say train, and be really brave about your training and work hard. Like, find teachers that really give you a safe place to explore. Find environments where you can make mistakes and it's not a problem. You have to be able to fail and keep going, which means you need supportive and rigorous training.
Thank you so much, first, for giving such a beautiful message and coming and sharing about your life and your experiences, and of course your technique. And at last, I just want to ask one last thing. So if anybody wants to contact you for training, how could they do that?
They would go to my website, which is www.batdorf, that's BATDORF.org. I think you can probably post it somewhere. And they can sign up for my mailing list, and through that they can send me an email.
And guys, this was Erika Batdorf, and we will come again with another person and another story. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Love to everyone in your country.